And then I saw her face. I'm a believer, and not a trace of doubt in my mind. I'm in love.
Hey guys, COHD here, and I am back with another reaction video. And today I'm going to react to another MLP fanfic reading called The Tale of the Lost Narrator. And it is, of course, by The Lost Narrator. So, yeah, it has been a while since I reacted to an MLP fanfic reading by The Lost Narrator. I mean, I do remember reacting to the last video, which is by The Lost Narrator, which is MLP fanfic bloopers are endless. And that was really fun, I gotta tell you, that was really fun. And yes, I am excited to react to another MLP fanfic reading, and this is a Grimdark. Of course, it is Halloween, and tomorrow is Halloween, so I might be thinking of doing a Halloween special for tomorrow. I know I did one last year, but I'll just make like a marathon of videos, just to make it better. Anyways, let me get this video up. Ready? Let's jump right in. And there's the Lost Narrator's intro. 7 Lost Nightmares.
There is a tale that lingers on the tongues of the ponies of Equestria. A tale of a storyteller who would recount gruesome, horrific stories to any pony who would listen. She
Yep,
resides along the travel
Narrator.
trails that lead to the major cities in Equestria. Only in the dead of night, she would appear out of the mist, her hoofsteps echoing among the trees in moonlight. Most ponies didn't know what to make of her, considering the weathered cloak that covered her body, and the crimson glowing eyes that shone through the leathery mask that hid her face. However, among the gruesome features of her exterior, there was one thing that caught ponies' eyes: her hollowed-out horn. It resembled the horn of a changeling on first glance, but upon closer inspection, one would realize that it was rotting from the inside out. There were documented cases of a unicorn horn rot epidemic before the advances of Medimagic, but that was before the time of the princess's reign. However, the horn upon this particular unicorn's head could still cast magic. Sufferers of unicorn horn rot were unable to use their magic, with some extreme cases of having the horn amputated. So, for this mare to even have such an ability with her horn at this level of decomposition was mind-boggling. Using this hollowed-out horn, she created worlds for her listeners. Worlds filled with agony and death, revenge and gore, darkness and despair. These stories gripped her listeners until the end of their telling, yet it wasn't until their closure that she would utter a single ominous phrase. But nothing can compare to the loss of a beloved. With that, she would walk back into the dead of night, the lingering smell of rotting flesh trailing behind her. Any pony unfortunate enough to hear her stories would have a series of cursed events befall them. Events that mirrored the stories they had heard from the lost
when is there going to be a
narrator.
picture?
And I
still
know
gonna
what
be
you're
dark?
thinking. It's just an old pony tale.
Wow.
Those kinds of
Quite
stories
compelling.
never end
I'll
up
go
being
with
true,
quite
merely woven by
compelling.
parents to scare their foals into listening. Those foals would grow into mares and stallions, and they would pass those stories on to their children, and the cycle would continue. But with every story, there is some truth behind the words. The Lost Narrator was an actual pony who lived in Equestria, though she wasn't always known for the title that was bestowed upon her.
Well, she wasn't really
And
actually on the show.
There is more to that story than just a simple entity damning ponies for her pleasure.
Oh yeah, I do remember that
So,
one comic dub
let's start
that
at the
was
Well, for starters,
on her channel.
the Lost
you know,
Narrator
the buzzwords.
wasn't her real name. She was just a simple unicorn mare named Curseword, who lived in a small town. She
Oh,
was
okay,
known
here
for
comes the
having a
picture.
very colorful language. She spoke her mind, and didn't care what others thought, even if she offended the ponies around her. She honestly believed that words were just words. Powerless
some
little
cool art there.
entities that only had meaning if you gave them that power. She lived in a little house in the middle of the town with her beloved. They loved each other so very much. Many ponies aspired to have their relationship, to have a natural understanding for one another like they had. Curseword's beloved knew her better than herself, and she knew her beloved's heart was pure. However, no relationship was without flaw. They had fights like any other couple, but their understanding for each other outshone any conflict. Curseword cherished her beloved with all of her heart. In her little town, she was known for being a storyteller to the fillies and colts, as one cannot make a living on just foul language alone. Utilizing her magic, she would create images, music, and sound that brought her stories to life. She would act out each one of them, pulling in her little listeners with such vivid detail. The foals were always left in awe. They would sit around for hours, listening to her stories of heroes conquering villains, good triumphing over evil, and happy moments within life. Curseword always made sure to leave a lingering moral in each one of her stories. It was her own way of making sure that she was helping those around her and ensuring that the good in ponies flourished. Some ponies would say that Curseword's life was near perfect, with each day being the same pleasant routine. However, with most stories like these, there was always something rotten underlining the core. No pony's life is as perfect. For you see, Curseword had not unlocked the true nature of her power. In the past, numerous events around her had seemed coincidental, particularly ones of a terrible nature. Ponies getting sick around her, bad luck falling upon them. It always seemed odd, but she would always keep these thoughts to herself. She never even told her beloved. She buried these thoughts and continued on with her storytelling and everyday life. That is until one day, when she had just finished recounting a fairy tale to a group of fillies and colts at the town library, when the truth came to light. There was a little colt who had not enjoyed the story as much as the other foals did. He had shouted a phrase that Curseword herself would dare not utter in front of them. She had been especially proud of that story that she had told that day. So for that little colt to say those words, it enraged her. At first, she politely told him to be quiet, but the little colt wouldn't listen. He just kept yelling, almost taunting Curseword to retaliate and defend the story she had told. Her rage began building inside. She glared at the colt, who just kept shouting and shouting. Finally, reaching her limit, her eyes shimmered crimson. She muttered, "You better watch out, or else your mother might wash that mouth clean off with soap." She then calmly gathered her things, walked out of the library, and went back to her home, hoping her beloved would calm her rage. And her beloved certainly obliged. Her beloved served a quiet, nice dinner, and they spent time alone together. Later, when Curseword went to bed, her thoughts drifted to getting up again in the morning and going down to the library to tell the stories to the foals. Dread began to take hold. It was then that she heard a blood-curdling scream. She lifted her head.
Did somebody
and
get
stared
killed?
Out the window, wondering where it had come from. A few moments passed. Nothing but silence. She paused, wondering whether she should get up, but decided to rest her head back on the pillow. She then heard another cry from outside. Sitting up in her bed, she turned
Wait,
to her
that's not
beloved,
coming from the sleeper?
who strangely did not
coming
stir
from outside
at
the house.
sounds. Curseword slowly got up and trotted over to the window, trying to pinpoint the source of the distant screams. Then she saw it. About 10 houses away, in one upper story, she could see a silhouette of a mare shouting. Curseword watched, wide-eyed, as the mare struggled with something, as if holding it down. Water splashed up at the window, leaving the glass blurry for her to see through. Uneasiness came over Curseword. Couldn't any other pony in the town hear that mare? The window was wide open. Every pony in the town should have heard those muffled screams. Curseword shook her beloved awake, demanding she get help. Her beloved woke up, perplexed, worried that the stress of Curseword's job had finally gotten the best of her, but decided to humor Curseword. They raced downstairs, galloping towards the house from where hence the sound originated. As they got closer, her beloved could finally hear those muffled screams that Curseword had heard so clearly. As Curseword and her beloved tried to force open the door of the little house, Curseword started shouting, trying to get other ponies to wake up. Ponies in the neighboring houses began to stir from their slumber. She finally managed to pry the door open with her magic, and she raced up the stairs, reaching the bathroom at the end of the hall that faced her own house. As she reached the door, her mouth opened in shock at the sight before her. The mirror she had seen in the window was standing over the tub. The tap was still on, water overflowing everywhere. She was panting and hunched over, her mane disheveled. Below her in the tub was a small figure, floating lifeless in the rushing, chilled water. His identity finally clicked in Curseword's mind. It was the Colt from earlier that day. The mare who had drowned him slowly turned to Curseword, who stood there in silence, trying to process what had happened. Their eyes locked. In that brief moment, both knew what had happened. The irreversible actions of a mother, and the words Curseword had uttered only hours ago. That lingering truth rose to the surface in Curseword's mind. Had she caused these events to happen with just her words? As undesirable as the Colt's death was, she knew she had some claim in it. But how? That was the question that played back and forth in her mind after the police had questioned every pony, as she walked back home later with her beloved. She had not told the police of her suspicions. If she had a power this great, she needed to figure out a way to control it. Maybe it could be used for good. Maybe she could create events to help those around her, to help the town, to benefit her beloved. She knew she needed to dedicate all of her time to uncovering this mystery. And so she did. Every waking moment from then on was devoted to analyzing this newfound power she possessed. Morning and night, she would spend studying, researching, trying to gain any kind of knowledge of this. Had there been other ponies in history that could perform this feat? Equestrian history only went so far back, and Curseword could not find anything that could explain this. Unfortunately, though, as time went on, she started to forget her daily obligations, her storytelling to the foals, her daily upkeep, even her grocery shopping. Many ponies in the town worried about this obsession, still not knowing the truth of what Curseword wanted to learn about. They only saw her absences, and the foals sadly waiting for her to come and tell them stories. Not even her beloved knew what plagued her mind, and Curseword wanted to keep it that way. She refused to let any pony know the true nature of her research, afraid of what someone else might do with this kind of knowledge. With a power as great as hers, able to will things to happen by speaking words alone, it could overshadow even the princess's power in the wrong hooves. But these walls that Curseword built around her were far from healthy. She began to push every pony away, only engrossed over this power and its secrets. Days began to blur together. She forgot to eat. She forgot to sleep. She forgot to wash and look after herself. Her beloved tried to make her see sense, but her research had become her passion and held sway over her whole life. One night, after traveling to Camelot in hopes of finding a clue to the truth, she arrived home to find her beloved at the dining room table, candles lit, and the lingering smell of food, cooked many hours ago, hanging in the air. Her beloved looked up, eyes filled with tears. Curseword stood stock still, as the realization flashed in her mind, soon followed by guilt and regret. She had forgotten their anniversary. She hadn't meant to. She was doing all this for the both of them, after all. Her obsessions with her studies was not just for her, but for her beloved as well. She was trying to better their lives, and all that hope was instilled in finding the truth. Yet, her beloved did not know or understand this. She only saw Curseword growing more and more distant, unaware of her true motives. With frustrations and emotions running high, an argument ensued. Her beloved demanded and pried, wanting to know what she was hiding from her. Curseword began to tremble with anger, nervousness. Why couldn't her beloved just understand it was better she didn't know the truth? She shut her eyes, hoping her beloved would stop, but she just kept shouting, yelling that curse word didn't love her anymore. Those words hit a terrible nerve. Curse word could feel the lump in her throat, trying to choke what was left of her patience. Her eye snapped open, glinting crimson red. Her mind had reached its limit. She shouted, "Just leave me alone." With that, she ran upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. She stood in their bedroom, wondering if she had taken things too far with her quest to understand the truth. She had never meant to be that heartless to her beloved. One of the main reasons she was even pushing herself was for her beloved's sake. But there was still no reason to act that way. She sighed, knowing that she needed to make things right. She opened the door and walked back downstairs, calling out to her beloved. But only the silence of the quiet little home answered her. Curse word called out to her again, thinking she was quietly seething. But only the silence remained. It was then that curse word began to glance around their little home and notice the table that had been cleared of any romantic effects. She found that odd, considering that she had been upstairs only for a few minutes. She called out again and was about to make her way outside to see if her beloved had gone for a walk when she sensed how empty the house felt. The encroaching void moved through the air and washed over her as she looked around the room, wondering what had happened. It wasn't until her eyes fell upon the photo on the shelf that she had realized the truth and what she had accidentally done. A photo frame where curse word stood alone, where once she had been smiling at another pony as they celebrated their anniversary. Now she was smiling to herself. Curse word's beloved had been erased from her life. Not a single pony in town remembered them as a couple. They only remembered curse word, the lonely storyteller. Curse word held onto the memories of her beloved tightly, trying to piece together what had happened. Panic and devastation began to consume curse word. She had caused this. The one thing in her life that made her truly happy had vanished without a trace. Because of her. Was her beloved dead? Or just misplaced? Had she been moved somewhere else in Equestria, given a different life? Or had she vanished completely? And how did curse word even cause that to happen? Even now, she was wondering about her strange new magic. The crushing reality of curse word's hidden power only drove her obsession deeper into the darker depths of her own mind. If she had made her beloved disappear, then surely she could make her beloved reappear the same way. She refused to give up on the hope of being reunited with her beloved. For, you see, even though the ponies in the town could not remember the pony that had always been her faithful companion, her beloved's belongings were still there in their home. It didn't make any sense. She knew that, dead or alive, her beloved had to be somewhere. It was just a matter of time and discovery. Curseword decided that she would go back to her storytelling, but with a difference. She would recount memories of her beloved to other ponies. No longer were her stories tailored to a younger audience, for they were stories of love and the crushing reality of loss. Curseword purchased a traveling wagon, loaded up the tattered remains of her life, and made her way along the traveler trails in Equestria,
Looks like,
wearing a silvery
we're
cloak
about to
that
see a
had
new
once
image.
belonged to her beloved. She would tell stories to any traveler who would listen, and felt closer to finding her beloved again with each story she told. Her words had power after all. She truly believed that if she kept trying, just kept speaking, just kept narrating their life together, she would somehow, some way, bring back her beloved by the sheer power of her words. It didn't matter that she never cracked how to enact that strange power of hers on command. Tenacity became her best friend, and she kept at her quest, even when she failed time and time again. However, Curseword's plight lasted for many years, and proved ever more fruitless as time wore on. She told the same stories over and over, hoping to remember some new detail that would unlock the mystery on how to reverse her beloved's disappearance. But she never did. One day, a group of fellow travelers told her that her boring love stories were getting old. They demanded she tell them another story, a new one she had never told before, but she refused. She would tell no story other than those of
I
her
recognize this
beloved,
picture.
and there were no new stories to tell.
This is the
They
picture on the
insisted
thumbnail.
that she tell something new, something made up. It was then that the hatred began to boil to the surface, and she stared at those ungrateful ponies. How dare they not listen to her stories? No, her memories. Her last remnants of her beloved. Her tales were all that she had left of her most precious sun pony besides the old and weathered cloak. She looked at the travelers, anger glimmering in her crimson eyes as she said, "Those stories are the only ones you will ever hear." She left them there, reeling from the adrenaline and anger coursing through her veins. Returning to her wagon, she decided that it would be wise just to rest for a while. As the horizon drifted lazily into dusk and then night, she wondered whether her quest was hopeless after all. She had been the one to cause her own heartache. Her beloved was gone, and she foolishly thought that telling stories could reverse that? Bitterness swelled in her chest. She was tenacious, yes, but tenacity can only take someone so far. Hope has to carry that burden after all, and her hope was in short supply these days. She finally decided enough was enough. She had gone years without her strange power manifesting again. Now, it seemed like it would never surface again. Maybe this was the last part of her punishment for neglecting the best thing that had ever happened to her. It was time for Curseword to return to her hometown and her empty house, filled with nothing but old memories and old regrets. It was that next morning, though, on her way back to her town, that she overheard a commotion in a camp near to where she had parked her wagon. The royal guards themselves had arrived to secure the area. Drawing closer to the crowd that had gathered, she learned that a group of travelers had been discovered with vicious slash marks on their ears and throats. Nearby travelers had heard crazed shouting coming from the nearby campsite, yelling about that mare and her stories. In the morning, they were found dead in pools of their own blood. The reports that the guards made surmised that each pony was suffering from paranoid delusions from eating the mushrooms nearby, since a skillet of them had been burned to a crisp on the campfire, and they had committed suicide to quiet their minds. Curseword alone understood what had happened. She saw the power of her words in a new light. Once again, ponies had fallen victim to her, and once again, she was riddled with guilt. It seemed the only way that the power manifested itself was when she spoke the words with the malicious intent. Realizing this, she knew that she could no longer tell her stories or say her words to innocent victims. She had ruined so many lives with her power. The rude cult, these ungrateful ponies, her beloved. She wanted to right the wrongs she had committed. She did not want any innocent blood on her hooves. So, instead of returning home, she continued on the traveler trails. Yet this time, she wore a mask that she had fashioned for herself to hide her shame and identity. She didn't want ponies to know who she was, especially considering what she planned to do. Curseword began to target particular ponies along her travels, one whose hooves were unclean and who were no strangers to the darkness within. Murderers, rapists, vile ponies that needed to be punished for their crimes but had slipped through the hooves of the law. She made it her business to find out about them and then find them and then tell them her stories. She told them twisted and gruesome tales of the most depraved acts that had ever been committed within Equestria. Tales of murder, revenge, blood, guts, and viscera. Those ponies would listen in awe as her voice enspelled them, mesmerized by curse word and her storytelling ability, as she detailed twisted narratives that even she couldn't believe were coming from her mouth. She wanted to punish those ponies, and so, each time that she did this, the ponies she spoke to would befall a fate most fitting for their crimes. It was a dark justice for the pain that they had caused to others, and it slated the burning need inside of her to punish and slay with her tainted powers. Curseword felt a sense of accomplishment. She truly believed that her beloved would be proud of the good she was doing. She was ridding Equestria of all of its evils. She had to at least try to atone for her sins. Yet, as time went on, Curseword began to notice a change within herself. With each pony she damned, her body began to reflect the nature of her stories. Her flesh began to green, then rot, and then peel from her forelegs. Her horn gnarled and hollowed, but was still somehow able to utilize magic. And most of all, her face beneath her mask changed until, well, you see, after a time, she wasn't just wearing the mask to hide her identity. It has been said that Curseword didn't have any flesh or muscle underneath that mask, only white bone and hollow crimson eyes. Others have said that the mask fused itself onto her skull, becoming her face in place of her old one. No one knows for certain, for no one ever saw her without the mask anymore. Curseword had truly lost herself in her stories. Her sole intent for starting her quest had been to find her beloved, but it had somehow degraded into something much darker. She became worried that if her beloved was indeed alive, and if they did ever meet each other again, that her beloved would not recognize the monster that Curseword had become. Word of her began to spread, and soon she was feared by all travelers of Equestria, both good and bad. They warned each other to be leery of the tales of the lost narrator, a mare in a mask who would damn you for not enjoying her stories of death and despair. Their tales weren't all true, but that hardly mattered. She ceased to be a mere pony. She had become a legend. And as years went on, the story was passed down from generation to generation. Curseword endured, perhaps made immortal by her strange power, perhaps merely immortalized by her fame. Yet you can see why ponies today still think that this story of the lost narrator is just an old pony tale. She is a narrator of stories, and those who hear them are lost. Or maybe she narrates stories because she herself is lost. Hardly any pony remembers Curseword, the odd, lonely pony who left her hometown and never came back. Curseword was just a footnote in history. The lost narrator became a piece of history, and myth, and lore. The legend of her is so old that now she certainly can't be alive, especially in a time of such great harmony. Besides, Princess Celestia would have received knowledge of her ruinous power by now and done something to stop her, right? The Lost Narrator is just a story to scare foals into listening to their parents, and to warn travelers not to let strangers into their campsites when they travel. She is a something, not a some pony. She's just fear and regret and dark bitterness masquerading as a do-gooding incarnate. She is a lost soul. But still, her fate is nothing compared to the loss of a beloved.
Huh. I guess that's over. That wasn't even that scary. Sorry, I had to burp. Yeah, sometimes I don't find other, like, grimdark fanfictions being that scary because all there is talking, but not moments that ponies are getting killed or anything. But hey, I still think that this is a good fanfiction. I am a big fan of The Lost Narrator, so yep, Lost Narrator, hope you're watching. And to those of you who are wondering what was all that noise in the background of my voice, and yes, if you remember my last video, I still have my window open and it started to rain. So to those of you who don't want that in the video, I'll probably edit that out. And like I said in the last one, stay tuned for more Halloween reactions. And maybe later on I might react to the MLP Season 6 finale. Once again guys, thanks for watching and ahoy!